let's talk about Donald Trump. Somebody asked me not to talk about Donald Trump, and I don't think that we're at the point anymore where we can't talk about him. You know, he's not the Sandman or Bloody Mary, where if you don't say their name, they won't come. That's not how Donald Trump works. Donald Trump is here. Donald Trump is a legitimate problem for many, many reasons. There is a little bit of nuance that I have to discuss on top of that, but for the most part, my opinion is Donald Trump is a problem. So let's start from the top to bottom. Let's see how quickly I can go through this. The rally on Friday night that was taken over by a combination of MoveOn.org, Black Lives Matter, and Bernie Sanders supporters. Not Bernie Sanders' campaign, but supporters of Bernie Sanders. They outnumbered the Trump supporters. They planned it, they did it, and good on them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Bernie Sanders said something I disagree with. Bernie Sanders said it's okay for them to protest, but it's not okay for them to disrupt. Semantics, yes, but Bernie Sanders, the very definition of protest is to disrupt. And so good on MoveOn.org, the kids, the young people who supported Bernie Sanders and Black Lives Matter in Chicago who said, we're not going to put up with this. This doesn't work in Chicago. Matter of fact, that's what Jamal Green. I'm a fan of that young man. Somebody get him on my show. He said, somebody asked him, well, are you going to get on a plane and go somewhere else and protest? He said, no, this is a Chicago thing. We've got things to work on here in Chicago. We're protesting Rahm Emanuel. So I'm not going anywhere else to protest. I'm staying right here. But we needed Trump to know that this doesn't happen in Chicago. This won't go down in Chicago. So again, I want to say good on them, you know. Now, let's speak to the violence, right? There was a violent component in the protest, in the aftermath of the protest. And I to be honest with you, you know, if you're only concerned about violence now, even though Donald Trump has incited violence, even though Donald Trump has told people I will pay your legal fees, even though Donald Trump has said I want to bust them in the face and carry them out on a stretcher, if you are concerned about the violence that comes because of people's reaction to this type of rhetoric and this vitriol, then you're not really concerned about violence. You're concerned with the political opportunity to use the threat of violence or call someone a thug or try to silence someone because they got violent. I have to say that a little bit better, right? You're not really concerned about the violence. You're only concerned with the political opportunity that's provided by claiming that someone else is violent. Because if you can claim someone else is violent, then that gives you the ability to have the moral high ground, right? That's all they want in this conversation from Friday night is the conversation of, oh, Donald Trump has the political, oh, I have the political high ground, or we're Donald Trump supporters and our First Amendment rights were attacked and we have the moral high ground. No. Because nobody said anything of substance towards Donald Trump in regard to the young woman that was pushed around by grown men, pushed around like a rag doll. No one said anything about he got arrested, but nobody condemned the, and when I say nobody who's now saying, oh, there's violence at the Donald Trump rally, you know, who has expressly condemned this, the white man who punched the young black man in the face. So everyone who's concerned about violence now, I got a headache, guys, sorry. Everyone who's concerned about violence now, where were you when Donald Trump was inciting violence? And one of one of the supporters emailed me and said, okay, sorry guys, I gotta take 5. One of the supporters emailed me and said that Donald Trump, if we had a conversation about us not liking somebody, I'm back, I'm sorry, I tuned out for a second. If we had a conversation and I told you that I don't like that person, and I said, I want you to hurt that person, and I'll take care of your legal fees. That should be illegal, right? In any normal sense of a transaction, that should be illegal. But somehow Donald Trump is able to say, knock him out, I'll pay your legal fees, but he's not held accountable for this. But when the city of Chicago says enough is enough, we're not going to take this in our town, when they express their First Amendment rights, all of a sudden, we're surprised because there is a confrontation with a group of people who have been violent all along. A group of people who have been threatening, a group of people who have been pushing back, a group of people who have been saying the most vitriolic thing. We're surprised when people stand up and say, no, we're not going to take this in our town. And then you're surprised when there's a confrontation. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. That's the thing. And actually, I keep lying. It makes total sense to me because it's a political posturing game. That's all it is. It's Donald Trump's supporters now acting as though they're the victims when they have been the victimizer. They have been the abuser. They have been the oppressor. And now they're saying that they have been oppressed. It is the classic Christian persecution complex. It is a persecution complex where they want the right to offend. They want the right to oppress. They want the right to attack. And if anybody ever dares say anything to them, then all of a sudden they're the victims. They're the victims because they no longer have the right to oppress. Classic. So I understand it, but I just don't understand why people, let me make a new scene here. I don't understand why the Democratic establishment has not completely obliterated that narrative. I don't understand why people who are progressive have just let that slide, right? We know the game. You know that this is exactly what Donald Trump is doing. They're playing the persecution complex, even though they are the ones doing the persecution. But now we're in the media. We're allowing them to have this conversation. We're allowing them to have this conversation about them being the victims and their rights being oppressed and their First Amendment rights being taken advantage of when they are the ones doing the oppressing. And the reason I pose it in terms of the Democratic establishment is because I tweeted this morning, and I sincerely mean this. If the Democratic Party was half as good fighting conservatism as they are fighting progressive movements, then we wouldn't even be having a conversation about Donald Trump. Donald Trump would not even be possible if the Democratic Party was half as good fighting against, and the establishment Democratic Party particularly was half as good fighting against conservatism as they are fighting against progressivism. They specialize, and we see this. This is the case even for race issues, right? The case for race issues is that we are so good at fighting against against progressives, intramural fighting. We have mastered the art of fighting against microaggressions. We have mastered the art of fighting against would-be progressive allies that don't understand how to talk about race, or they don't understand the nuances of race. We understand that. We know how to do it. We know how to fight it well. But we've been fighting internally so hard that we have not fought back against a machine that could create something like Donald Trump. We've been fighting microaggressions and have ignored macroaggressions. And that's the thing. What is the point? Is your point as a Democratic establishment only to be good at fighting with yourself, while conservatism moves us further and further and further to the right? Because you're good at fighting. They have put up a hell of a fight against Bernie Sanders. It's such a good political fight, I'll give them a hand. They're doing a phenomenal job fighting against Bernie Sanders, but they are not equipped to fight back against the narrative and the persecution complex and this very blatant macro racism. But Bernie Sanders is not sensitive on race. All right, folks, I absolutely think I've done all I could do. Not feeling well tonight, not feeling my best. I think I better stop here because my mind is telling me no. My body is telling me yes, whatever the song is. All right, folks, tomorrow night I'm going to have Noah Chonga and Solomon on with me to pinch hit. And you guys have a great night. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Crazy mother.
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.